30 years have passed since that fateful summer day when the Lawsons vanished without a trace in America's most famous national park. Welcome to one of Yellowstone's most perplexing mysteries, a case that haunted investigators for decades until an accidental discovery changed everything. Before we begin, thank you for watching. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from and if you've ever visited Yellowstone National Park yourself. July 17, 1994, started as a perfect day for exploration. Michael Lawson, a 42-year-old geology professor from Montana State University, and his 8-year-old daughter Emma had planned this father-daughter hiking trip for months. They were last seen at the Fairy Falls Trailhead parking lot, smiling and checking their backpacks. Their disappearance would become one of the most extensive search operations in the park's history. Rangers found their blue Subaru Outback with a half-eaten lunch inside, 2 water bottles, and Emma's stuffed wolf toy she called Yellowstone. But beyond the trailhead, it was as if they'd simply evaporated into the wilderness. What happened to them? The mystery deepened when search dogs lost their scent at a particular rock formation. It wasn't until 3 decades later, when a geological survey team accidentally discovered a collapsed tunnel system beneath that very same area, that the truth began to emerge. What they found inside would not only reopen the case, but reveal a horrifying secret that had been literally buried beneath the park for 30 years. Michael Lawson was known among his colleagues as meticulous and cautious, not the type to wander off trail, especially with his daughter. His wife Sarah described him as pathologically prepared for outdoor excursions. He'd served as a volunteer park guide for 5 summers and knew Yellowstone's hazards intimately. Emma was their only child, born after years of fertility struggles. Bright and curious, she shared her father's fascination with rocks and natural formations. Sarah later recalled how Emma had spent the week before the trip carefully packing and repacking her little backpack, organizing her collection of geodes, and making lists of formations she hoped to see. The Lawsons lived in a modest home near the university in Bozeman, surrounded by Michael's rock collections and Emma's artwork. Colleagues remembered Michael as dedicated but private. He kept to himself mostly, said Dr. Catherine Wells, a former department colleague. But he lit up when talking about Emma or his research. In the months before their disappearance, Michael had been working on a paper about unique geological formations in less-traveled areas of Yellowstone. He'd mentioned to colleagues that he believed there were unexplored cave systems that might contain mineral deposits unlike any previously documented in the park. Sarah recalled her husband becoming increasingly excited about something he'd discovered in his research, though he remained frustratingly vague about the details. He kept saying he needed to confirm something in person, that if he was right, it could change our understanding of the park's formation, Sarah told investigators. What few people knew was that Michael had been corresponding with park maintenance worker Jackson Reed about unusual formations spotted during routine trail work. Their emails, discovered years later, revealed an increasingly urgent tone, with Michael pressing for specific locations and Reed becoming more evasive. The morning of July 17th began with perfect hiking weather, clear skies, and mild temperatures. Security footage from the park entrance showed Michael's Subaru passing through at 7:24 a.m. Emma's face was visible in the passenger window, her hand waving excitedly at the ranger. They stopped for breakfast at the Canyon Village cafeteria, where witnesses later recalled seeing them poring over a map. The waitress remembered Emma ordering chocolate chip pancakes and Michael asking about trail conditions near Fairy Falls. They seemed really happy, she told rangers. The little girl was talking about finding special rocks that her dad had promised to show her. Cell phone records show Michael made 2 calls that morning, one to Sarah at 8:15 a.m., telling her they had arrived safely. The second, more puzzling, was to an unregistered number at 9:03 a.m. This call lasted only 28 seconds. By 10:30 a.m., they had parked at the Fairy Falls trailhead lot. 2 hikers reported seeing them checking their gear beside their car. The dad was adjusting the little girl's backpack straps, and she was holding a small notebook with drawings in it, reported hiker Melissa Donovan. These would be the last confirmed sightings of Michael and Emma Lawson. What investigators would later determine is that Michael had received a hand-drawn map from someone showing what appeared to be an unmarked trail branching off the main path. This map was never found, but its existence was confirmed by a crumpled copy discovered years later in Jackson Reed's possessions. When Michael and Emma failed to return to their hotel that evening, Sarah called park rangers. By midnight, the first search teams were combing the trail with flashlights, calling out their names into the darkness. Park Ranger Robert Harmon organized the search operation that began at first light the next morning. In most cases, lost hikers are found within 24 hours, usually having wandered off trail, Harmon explained in his report. But this was different from the start. The search involved over 50 personnel, including rangers, volunteers, and search and rescue teams with dogs. They found the Lawsons' vehicle undisturbed, with no signs of wildlife interference or struggle. Inside, rangers discovered their lunch cooler, Emma's stuffed wolf, and a camera with photos taken earlier that morning. The search dogs tracked their scent along the main trail for approximately 2 miles before abruptly losing it near a large rock formation locals called the Sentinel. This peculiar loss of scent puzzled handlers. It was as if they'd been plucked from the trail, dog handler Teresa Mullins noted. Dogs don't just lose a scent like that unless something unusual happened. Within days, the operation expanded to include helicopter sweeps, thermal imaging, and teams searching increasingly distant areas. The official theory initially centered on a wildlife encounter, possibly a bear attack, with the bodies dragged away. Yet no blood evidence or torn clothing was ever found. Another theory suggested they might have fallen into a thermal feature, though all known geysers and hot springs in the area were thoroughly searched. Some speculated about a kidnapping, but no ransom demands ever came. Local news outlets covered the story intensively for weeks. Speculation ran wild in the small community of West Yellowstone. Some folks started talking about how there are parts of the park that aren't on any map, recalled local diner owner Hal Jenkins. Places where strange things happen. Within months, the active search was scaled back. Sarah Lawson refused to leave the area, renting a cabin near the park entrance for nearly a year, organizing volunteer searches every weekend. But as seasons changed and snow covered the landscape, hope dimmed. The case eventually joined the park's small but haunting collection of unsolved disappearances. The Lawson family home in Bozeman stood empty for 3 years after the disappearance. Sarah couldn't bear to sell it, clinging to the hope that somehow Michael and Emma might return. Emma's bedroom remained untouched, her collection of rocks still arranged on shelves, labeled in her careful child's handwriting. A journal found in Michael's office contained cryptic notes about hollow spaces beneath the surfaces and hidden systems older than the park itself. These writings fueled conspiracy theories about government cover-ups of secret underground facilities. The university established a scholarship in Michael's name, and a small memorial bench was placed near the Ferry Falls trailhead. As years passed, the case faded from public consciousness. Sarah eventually relocated to Colorado, but maintained contact with park authorities, calling every few months for updates that never came. Park Ranger Bob Harmon, who led the original search, never fully recovered from the case's failure. "Some nights I still dream about them out there somewhere," he told a local newspaper on the 10th anniversary of the disappearance. "I walk the trail in my dreams, and this time I find what I missed." Jackson Reed, the maintenance worker who had corresponded with Michael, left his position 6 months after the disappearance, citing personal reasons. His departure raised no suspicions at the time. The trail itself became something of a dark attraction, with some hikers making the journey specifically because of the mystery. Rangers reported visitors leaving small stones or toys at the spot where the search dogs lost the scent. In 2004, when the case's 10-year anniversary prompted a brief revival of interest, a psychic claimed the Lawsons had crossed into another dimension near the rock formation, a claim park officials dismissed, but which added to the location's mystique. By 2014, most had accepted that the mystery would never be solved. The case file gathered dust in the park's records, one of several unsolved disappearances in Yellowstone's long history. For Emma Lawson, July 17, 1994, began as the most exciting day of her young life and ended in a nightmare. After leaving the main trail, following the map Jackson Reed had provided, Michael and his daughter found themselves at the base of a rock formation not mentioned in official park literature. A narrow opening, barely visible behind a cluster of pines, revealed what appeared to be a small cave entrance. "Look, Emmy," Michael had said, excitement in his voice. "This might be what I've been looking for." Inside, the passage widened unexpectedly, revealing a tunnel system that showed signs of both natural formation and human modification. As they ventured deeper, Michael taking photographs and notes, they heard a sound behind them. Jackson Reed stood blocking their exit, a park maintenance uniform making him seem official. "You shouldn't be here," he said quietly. "No one should know about this place." What followed was a swift, silent struggle in the dim light. Michael, attempting to protect Emma, was struck from behind with a heavy flashlight. Emma screamed as her father collapsed, blood seeping from a wound on his temple. Reed restrained the terrified child, covering her mouth. "I'm saving you," he whispered. "The park needs to be protected." The truth was that Reed had discovered the tunnel system years earlier while doing maintenance work and had become obsessed with what he believed was his mission to protect it from exploitation. He had lured Michael there after learning of the professor's research into unusual formations. Reed took them deeper into the tunnel system, to a crude living space he had established in a larger chamber. For days, Michael drifted in and out of consciousness, the head injury leaving him disoriented and weak. Emma, terrified but resilient, tried to care for her father while looking for chances to escape. Reed would disappear for hours, presumably to maintain his cover at work, leaving them with minimal water and food. The tunnel system was more extensive than either captive realized, with multiple chambers and passages, some of which Reed had blocked off. Emma would later recall counting days by scratching marks on the cave wall with a small rock, reaching 23 before losing track. Michael's condition worsened as infection set in. Without proper medical care, his lucid periods became fewer and briefer. During one such moment of clarity, he whispered to Emma, "Remember the story of Hansel and Gretel? Leave marks." When Reed wasn't watching, Emma began placing small colored stones from her pocket at junctions in the tunnels, creating a trail she hoped might lead to escape. In April 2024, Cassandra Cass Miller, an investigative journalist working on a series about unsolved national park disappearances, arrived in Yellowstone. At 42, the same age Michael Lawson had been when he vanished, Cass had developed a reputation for bringing fresh perspectives to cold cases. "The Lawson case kept drawing me back," she explained in her notes. "Something about the dogs losing the scent so abruptly never made sense." Cass began by interviewing Sarah Lawson, now living in Denver and remarried, though she had never legally declared Michael dead. "Sarah showed me a box of Michael's research that she'd kept all these years," Cass recorded. "Most of it seemed like standard geology papers, but there were handwritten notes about anomalous spaces in the park's geological surveys." Bob Harmon, the former park ranger, had retired to a cabin just outside the park boundaries. Now in his 70s, he still hiked regularly and kept a map marked with every search zone from that summer of 1994. "Bob told me something he'd never included in official reports," Cass noted. He'd found a single child-sized footprint about 50 yards off-trail near the rock formation, but the ground was too hard elsewhere to show a trail. Park records revealed something unexpected. Jackson Reed, the maintenance worker who had corresponded with Michael, had filed an unusual number of solitary maintenance requests for the area near Ferry Falls in the months before and after the disappearance. Most maintenance workers operated in pairs, but Reed had repeatedly requested solo assignments. He was always a loner, recalled former park superintendent William Nash. Good worker, knew the park better than almost anyone, but kept to himself. When Cass tried to locate Reed, she discovered he had died in 2019, living as a recluse in a small Montana town. His obituary mentioned no family. What no one knew was that Cass had already connected dots that investigators had missed. Reed's maintenance logs showed a pattern of activity around certain lesser-visited areas of the park, including notations about structural integrity checks near where the Lawsons had disappeared. These seemingly routine reports, when mapped over time, revealed Reed's particular interest in specific geological features, the same ones Michael had been researching. On May 15, 2024, a geological survey team mapping thermal features detected an anomaly beneath the surface near the infamous rock formation where the search dogs had lost the Lawsons' scent 3 decades earlier. Using ground-penetrating radar, they identified what appeared to be a cavity system approximately 20 feet below the surface. Initial assessment suggested natural cave formation with possible human modification, noted lead geologist Dr. Alan Reeves. When the team returned with equipment to insert a camera probe, they discovered evidence of a collapsed tunnel entrance. Park authorities, alerted to the possibility of historical significance, authorized a limited excavation. What they found sent shockwaves through the investigation community. Just inside the collapsed entrance lay a child's backpack, preserved in the dry environment and still containing a notebook with Emma Lawson written on the cover. Cass Miller, who had been granted access to observe the excavation due to her research credentials, immediately recognized the significance. Working with renewed urgency, the team carefully widened the entrance. The tunnel beyond showed signs of a major collapse that had occurred years before, likely sealing whatever lay beyond. As they advanced through the partially cleared passage, Cass noticed something unusual: small colored stones placed at intervals along one side of the tunnel. They weren't random, she later wrote. They were deliberately placed, like breadcrumbs. Following this trail of markers, the team navigated through the branching tunnel system until they reached a larger chamber that had been partially protected from the collapse. Inside, they discovered the remnants of long-term habitation, a makeshift bed, canned food supplies, a water collection system, and a battery-powered lantern. On one wall, hundreds of tally marks had been scratched into the stone, but it was what they found in a small alcove that broke the case wide open: a leather-bound journal with J. Reed embossed on the cover, containing detailed entries spanning years, including the summer of 1994. "I had to protect them from the truth," one entry read. "The professor was going to expose everything. The child is innocent, but would tell. I have no choice but to keep them here until they understand." Beside the journal lay a stack of Polaroid photographs showing Michael and Emma Lawson in captivity. The final devastating piece of evidence was discovered behind a crude stone wall at the back of the chamber: human remains. Park authorities immediately secured the site and brought in FBI forensic specialists. The remains of 3 individuals were eventually recovered, those of an adult male, a child, and an adult female of undetermined age. Dental records quickly confirmed the male remains belonged to Michael Lawson. The child's remains, presumed to be Emma's, showed signs of having survived significantly longer than the adult male. Most disturbing were indications that the child had attempted to dig through one of the collapsed passages, with fingernail marks scoring the packed earth. The third set of remains presented a mystery until DNA testing identified them as belonging to Elaine Winters, a hiker who had disappeared in 1991, a case that had never been connected to the Lawsons. Reed's journal, recovered intact, revealed the horrifying truth. He had developed a delusional belief that he was protecting the park from people who would exploit its secret places. His writings described kidnapping Michael and Emma after learning the professor had discovered the tunnel system independently. "Today I brought them to the sanctuary," read an entry dated July 17, 1994. "The professor fought, which I didn't expect. Had to subdue him. The child is frightened, but will learn." Subsequent entries documented Michael's declining health from an untreated head wound and Reed's growing fixation on Emma as someone who understood the park's spirit. The journal indicated Michael had died approximately 3 weeks after the abduction. Reed had continued to hold Emma captive, apparently convincing her over time that the outside world believed them both dead and that returning was impossible. Most chilling were entries showing Reed had been maintaining his park employment for months after the abduction, participating in searches while returning to the tunnels where he held his captives. "Searched with the others today," read an August entry. "They looked right at the entrance and saw nothing. The park protects its secrets." The final entries, dated nearly a year later, described a cave-in that Reed survived but claimed had taken the girl. Forensic evidence suggested Emma had actually survived for months after her father's death, possibly attempting to escape during Reed's absences before succumbing to either injuries from a partial collapse or malnutrition. Cass Miller, working with FBI investigators, pieced together the full narrative of what had happened to the Lawsons. The case that had baffled authorities for 30 years finally had answers, though they brought no comfort. Jackson Reed had been maintaining these tunnel systems secretly for years, explained FBI Special Agent Diana Kovach at a press conference. He appears to have discovered them during routine maintenance and developed an obsessive attachment to them, viewing them as sacred spaces he needed to protect. Reed's personal history revealed a troubled man who had worked at 3 different national parks with unexplained resignations from each position. Most significantly, investigators discovered that in the years following the Lawson disappearance, Reed had corresponded with various geologists under false names, apparently monitoring research that might lead others to his tunnels. Sarah Lawson, now 69, was present when investigators confirmed the remains belonged to her husband and daughter. "I've lived with not knowing for 30 years, she told reporters. "The knowing is terrible, but the not knowing was its own kind of hell." The colored stones Emma had placed throughout the tunnels, taken from her rock collection, were recognized by Sarah as her daughter's attempt to create an escape path. Even in that darkness, she was trying to find a way out, Sarah said. That was always her nature. Further excavation of the tunnel system revealed it was far more extensive than initially believed, with evidence suggesting parts of it had been used by Reed as far back as the 1980s. The remains of Elaine Winters confirmed investigators' growing suspicion that Reed had been responsible for other disappearances in the park. A subsequent review of missing persons cases identified 2 other hikers whose disappearances matched Reed's pattern, though their remains were never located within the tunnel system. Park officials faced difficult questions about how Reed's activities had gone undetected for so long, especially given his unusual maintenance requests and solitary work habits. On October 2, 2024, Jackson Reed was posthumously charged with the kidnapping and murders of Michael and Emma Lawson, as well as Elaine Winters. The evidence recovered from the tunnel system proved conclusive, providing closure to 3 decades of questions. The case prompted a review of security protocols in national parks nationwide, with particular emphasis on staff monitoring and reporting of unusual behavior. As temperatures cooled across Yellowstone, the excavated tunnel entrance was permanently sealed with concrete, though not before a thorough documentation of the entire system. Ground-penetrating radar surveys identified additional tunnel networks in 3 other locations within the park, all subsequently investigated and secured. For Sarah Lawson, the resolution brought mixed emotions. "I always hoped that somehow, against all odds, they might have survived," she said at a memorial service held at the park, but knowing they were together at the end, that Michael tried to protect Emma until his last moment. There's some comfort in that. Cassandra Miller's investigation, originally intended as a magazine article, expanded into a comprehensive book documenting both the disappearance and the recovery 30 years later. Her careful mapping of Reed's activities revealed a methodical predator who had used his position of trust and knowledge of the park to operate undetected. What makes this case so disturbing is how Reed hid in plain sight, Miller wrote. He was on the search teams. He attended memorials. He watched as others looked in the wrong places, knowing exactly where his victims were hidden. The FBI's final report indicated that Reed had likely suffered from severe delusional disorder, believing himself to be a guardian of the park's secret places. His journal entries showed increasing paranoia in later years, with fears that others like the professor would discover and exploit the tunnel systems. In a final irony, geological experts determined that the formations Michael Lawson had been researching were indeed scientifically significant, representing a previously undocumented type of subsurface thermal activity. The academic paper he never completed would have been a notable contribution to understanding the park's geological history. Nearly a year after the discovery in the tunnels, Yellowstone National Park held a dedication ceremony for a new memorial near the Fairy Falls trailhead. A stone bench inscribed with the names of the Lawsons and other visitors lost in the park over the years provided a place for reflection. Sarah Lawson, accompanied by her second husband, placed Emma's restored collection of colored stones at the base of the memorial. She would have wanted them returned to the park she loved, Sarah explained, but in the sunlight, not the darkness. The Lawson case brought renewed attention to the broader issue of missing persons in national parks. A federal initiative established improved tracking systems and communication protocols between parks, enabling faster identification of patterns that might indicate serial predators like Reed. Michael and Emma Lawson were laid to rest in a private ceremony in Bozeman. Their remains finally returned to the family plot, where empty graves had waited for 30 years. Emma's notebook, recovered from her backpack in the tunnel, contained drawings of rock formations, childish poetry, and, toward the end, messages to her mother. "Tell Mom we're okay," read one of the final entries, the handwriting shaky but determined. "Dad says we'll find a way out soon." Bob Harmon, the former ranger who had led the original search, attended the funeral despite his failing health. "In all my years in the Park Service, this case haunted me the most," he said afterward. "I always felt we missed something. Turns out we were walking right over them for all those years." Cassandra Miller continued investigating cold cases in other national parks, her work now supported by a foundation established in the Lawsons' name. The foundation funded additional research into improved search and rescue techniques, including advanced ground-penetrating radar systems designed specifically for wilderness settings. Sarah Lawson, finding purpose in tragedy, became an advocate for families of missing persons, offering support and guidance to those facing the same uncertainty she had endured for decades. "The not knowing is the hardest part," she often told them. "Whatever the truth is, facing it brings its own kind of peace." The tunnel system that had been Reed's lair and the Lawsons' tomb was studied extensively before being sealed, revealing an unusual natural formation that had been expanded and modified over years. Geologists estimated it had first formed centuries ago through a combination of thermal activity and water erosion, creating spaces that remained hidden beneath the park's more visible wonders. Though the full truth of what happened in those dark passages would never be completely known, the recovered evidence painted a clear enough picture to finally close one of Yellowstone's most enduring mysteries. As seasons continued to change over Yellowstone National Park, the story of the Lawsons gradually transformed from a current tragedy to a historical one. Ranger-led tours near Fairy Falls sometimes mentioned the case as a somber reminder of the park's capacity for both beauty and danger. Visitors occasionally left small tokens at the memorial bench: a polished stone, a small toy wolf, a child's drawing. The University of Montana established the Michael Lawson Fellowship in Geological Sciences, supporting research students specifically interested in the park's unique formations. Emma's notebook, preserved by the FBI and later returned to Sarah, was donated to the park's historical archive, where selected pages were displayed in a small exhibit about the human history of Yellowstone. Her childish drawings of rock formations, labeled with careful attention to detail, reminded visitors of the curiosity and wonder the park inspired in even its youngest explorers. On warm summer days, not unlike the one when the Lawsons disappeared, hikers on the Fairy Falls Trail sometimes reported an unsettling feeling near the site of the former tunnel entrance, a heaviness in the air, a sense of being watched. Rangers attributed this to the power of suggestion, the knowledge of what had happened there coloring visitors' perceptions. But those who knew the full story understood that some places carry the imprint of their history, an echo of what transpired beneath the surface. Sarah Lawson visited the park one final time on what would have been Emma's 39th birthday. Standing at the memorial bench as afternoon light filtered through the pines, she placed her hand on the cool stone and whispered words only she could hear. Then she hiked the trail her family had taken that last day, not in grief, but in remembrance, completing the journey they never could. As she reached Fairy Falls and watched the water cascade into the pool below, a small, bright rainbow formed in the mist. Later, she would tell friends it felt like closure, a final goodbye across the decades. They're part of the park now, she said simply, and in that way, they're never really gone. The case of the Lawsons, though solved, would remain a part of Yellowstone's complex legacy. A reminder that beneath the visible beauty of the natural world lie depths and passages we may never fully understand, holding secrets that sometimes take generations to reveal.